Um, I've got lots of cool rabbit stories and wild pig stories and biodiversity stories that I can share with you. Um, and I'll share a couple of those. But I've got some other stories too. But I think that this issue of engagement and translational work, um, it cuts across at a meta level and has applicability and application and relevance at a meta level for whatever our work is. So that's sort of really where I'm coming from with this. Um, so I'd like to talk about this, my experience, my perspectives, and some of the principles that I think I've learned, what I think I've learned over the years, um, over the decades, frankly, about why engagement is or is not important, what it looks like or what it might look like, how to do it, how not to do it, and does it matter? Does it matter? Frankly, I think that depending on what sort of analytical frame you have, what your metrics are, uh, some folks would say it doesn't matter, it's not relevant. Other folks would say it's very relevant. So I like to and impactful. So I like to talk about that. We aren't going to be able to unpack these questions and issues in great detail and great depth. I see this as hopefully a starting conversation with you all. I'm willing to continue the conversation in the future, if that makes sense. What I'm most interested in doing today, though, is to provoke thinking and dialogue amongst all of us about community engagement, translational work in the context of the work that we all are responsible for and do. So my basic hypothesis is, despite our disciplinary and issue foci, the differences in that from a meta perspective, there are certain principles regarding community engagement and translational work that are common across our particular domains of work. I think in this, having said that, I think that regardless of what the issue is, the most challenging issue we face is people. I think that's the most challenging issue. I always say to my friends in Australia, where I worked a lot, uh, it's not about the pigs, folks. It's not about the rabbits. It's about the people, right? And we understand a lot about the biology of rabbits and the ecology of pig habitat and all that kind of stuff. But when you're managing these issues, dealing with issues like that are common issues, common property issues, if you will, issues that we all share and are impacted by, we've got to figure out how to work together, right? We got to figure out how to work together, and that's hard, and we don't spend much time on that. And folks like us I don't mean to generalize, I shouldn't do that. Many times we aren't experienced or trained or educated or encouraged to think about that aspect of the work that we do, right? Uh, but the issue is the people, it seems to me. Okay. And that means understanding not only our disciplines, but something about human behavior, something about communication, something about uh, individual as well as collective action, a whole understanding politics, a whole range of things, regardless of what our issues are. That's my starting point, and that's basic premises, and probably the critical thing that I've learned over the years. Excuse me. So, by the way, I don't have a PowerPoint. I'm just going to ramble on like this. I don't like PowerPoints. Okay, I'm hoping that this can be conversational. All right, and I will. Although I could go on and on, I'll shut up after a little bit here, and we can have some discussion. Okay. Uh, Let me tell you a couple stories. I've been doing this work for 50. God, I hate to admit this. 50 to nearly 60 years. Okay, and I've worked on economic development issues at the local and regional level. I've worked on public finance issues at the local and regional level. Uh, I've worked in Philadelphia on supporting people and working with people on horticultural issues, environmental issues, youth development issues, nutrition, okay, nutrition issues, whole range of things. Urban entomology, by the way, which is one I could go on and on about because it's critically important. I think of it as a keystone, but that's another discussion. Um, I've also been experientially, I can tell you stories about uh, my department head and my dean experience, right? And my administrative experience over the years. How how what we're talking about today, how we deal with each other, how we engage each other, is really the keystone to. Sorry, I keep using that. Is the centerpiece of effectiveness in those administrative roles. So this isn't just about the issues we deal with; it's about how we deal with each other in many different contexts. Um, a colleague of mine, good friend Justine Lindemann, who's on the call today, she and I've been doing with her leadership through her leadership have been doing some work on urban food systems over the years. And one of the things that we and the work has been grounded in in-depth listening sessions and interviews and with people who are living in those food deserts in urban settings, right? And we can think about that from what we know and from our research and what others are saying and all that, but we're talking to the people. What do we get? We get lived experience perspective. We get insights that we wouldn't normally have. Insights like if you food is, and I was at a Federal Reserve conference last week and somebody was talking about food food is as medicine, if you will, and an entry point into a whole range of urban issues that relate to food. In fact, they each relate to each other. Infrastructure, crime, safety, nutrition, you know, this intersection, the synthesis. Well, you don't see that in the policy space. You don't see that in the academic space. You talk to people on the ground in their space where they are. You see and learn this kind of insight. Okay? All right. I have another story from some work we did probably 20 years ago now over in Tamaqua, over in Schuylkill County, old hard coal country, anthracite coal country, and we were looking at the issue of uh, social capital relationships and its impact on economic development. And we did a whole series of interviews, uh, 70, roughly 70, 75 interviews. And we did a series of public uh, um, survey work, right, in the region. We prepared our report, and we always go back when we do this work and present it locally, right? We got killed. We got killed by the leaders. We were pilloried in the press, right? Because the people who were in the leadership roles, they say, that's not the way the world is. That's not the way the world is. We're doing this and these wonderful things, and we're renovating Tamaqua, and we're changing the world. Well, you know what? And we told them before they sent us on our way that evening. We told them, this is not what people living in this area are saying. There's a gap between what you all are doing and what people are experiencing in the Tamaqua region. So we kind of wrote about this as the Tamaqua paradox. All this great work, the people, this vision, and the work that was going on, but that it wasn't supported, and there was this political dissonance amongst people. The the local leaders hadn't connected. Okay, they hadn't connected. They weren't listening. There was no engagement. Right? No engagement. A little side story on that. 5 years later, I got a call from the dean. He says, "Ted, can you guys redo that Tamaqua stuff?" And I said, "Well, we know how to redo it, but the grant's over and the money's gone." And he said, "Well, the chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, who's the Tamaqua's in his district, would like it redone, right?" I said, "Well, cool. You know, transfer $8,000 over, and we'll redo the Tamaqua thing for you." And we did it, and we had coached those people about building relationships and listening and all that. And the markers that were used, there was improvement in the connectivity. This was about a 5 or 6 year time difference. Okay, that's the story. I'm going to move on. I'd like to tell you my rabbit story and pig story, but I won't bore you with that. But same kind of issue. And by the way, in many times it's the academics, it's the scientists, it's the quote anointed is not the right word, but in our world, the experts that are the hardest ones to come across this idea of sitting and talking and listening with humility to what people are experiencing and saying, and working to sort of co-create a path forward. Well, anyhow, lots of stories I could tell. Let me turn to some perspective, and I think you've already some perspective and some philosophy and some theory and methodology here about doing this work. Uh, at least what I think I've learned about doing this work. Okay, it's grounded in my perspectives and my experience. Some perspective. The issues we face are daunting, whatever they are. Environmental issues, health issues, technological issues, climate change. We've got daunting issues. We live, however, our world is characterized by interdependence amongst people, and radical uncertainty. Keep that uncertainty issue in mind. Radical uncertainty. You know, we can't escape that existential reality that in the context of where we're living, what our issues are, our lives, we can't escape the existential reality of that human interdependence with each other and with the world around us. This ever-changing world around us where we don't always know what's going to happen. Really important. You know, some of you, not all of you, but some of you will remember Don Rumsfeld, right? And maybe one of the good things he said, one of the good things he said was that there are unknown knowns. Okay. We know stuff will happen, but we don't know for sure. But then there are unknown unknowns as the world and technology and climate and on shifts, changes. Okay. So interdependence, uncertainty, not risk, by the way. Risk is easy. We got enough data, we can assign a number to it, right? That's easy stuff. It's the uncertainty that's the problem. We can't escape this. We simply can't escape this. And this idea, in my mind, of interdependence and radical uncertainty makes researching and engaging people and implementing coordinated and effective initiatives makes it really difficult. Whatever the issue is, makes it really difficult because we're talking about engaging people across their individual and their collective differences. And human health issue is individual, but it's also a collective issue, right? I mean, think about the. I mean, I'm not a doctor that makes a difference, but think about measles, okay, and vaccines, right? These are collective issues; they aren't just private issues. Uh, and that means we've got to deal with human difference and human perspectives. So I would argue that part of my perspective here is that with respect to doing community engagement, doing engaged research, uh, we have to respect and we have to acknowledge the ontology and the epistemology, including the local practical knowledge of people. That is imperative for addressing the issues, it seems to me. At least that's where I'm coming from. And this is the approach that colleagues and I take, and I've taken for decades now, and taken like many of my colleagues and I take this perspective. Frankly, uh, it's not always acknowledged and well received within the academy, and that's another discussion. We can have that discussion sometime if you like. Um, so some theory. I'm just going to give you a list of some theoretical ideas that I think are important that we need to be aware of, need to embrace. We really need to understand this human interdependence issue and what that entails. It's not just that we're interdependent, but how do we deal with that interdependence and how do we talk to each other across that interdependence? We need to come to grips with this understanding the implications of uncertainty, this radical uncertainty, and what's important for building, supporting strong individuals and strong communities and strong initiatives to address critical issues. Given that uncertainty, I've alluded to it, but let's get real about it. With this interdependence, there's difference, there's conflict, there's politics, there's power play involved. Okay. In engagement work, we need to understand those dynamics and have a perspective on how to deal with them. I would argue also that the engagement work, and effectively having an opportunity or increasing the probability of effectively addressing critical issues in our society, whatever they are, requires a relational approach as opposed to just a transactional approach. Let us come to your community and we'll do some things to help you out and then we'll leave. Okay, that's extractive. That's that's transactional as opposed to relational, where let's come together and figure out together, giving local practical knowledge, your experience, the experience that I might bring to the table that's relevant. Uh, how can we put that together and co-create paths forward? That's a that's I would argue is at the heart of this work. And it means understanding things like framing theory and how to reframe. If you see me in a way that challenges my identity and vice versa, we're not going to be able to work together. We're not going to be able to, it's not going to last. We might have a nice conversation, but it's not going to last. We've got to engage each other enough, work with each other enough to calibrate those identity and characterization frames so that we can work more effectively together. And let's understand epistemology. I mean, we all know epistemology, but let's understand the politics of epistemology, right? Epistemic politics. If I come in and I'm the economist, and I come in and I tell you, here's the best thing you can do to fix your local economy. Uh, that's top down. That's autocratic. All right. It doesn't acknowledge the lived experience. It doesn't bring in the lived experience of people in a particular community that I might be working with or a particular region. Right. Ask yourself, what is your epistemic politics as you do your work? Are you listening to others? Are you listening to the people you're working with? Are you contributing your expertise and knowledge in a way to foster learning and dialogue and coming together. These are hard things for us to do because it challenges our identity. Comes back to that. So there's a lot of other things that we could talk about in sort of this course theory space, but these are things that we need to really understand. Uh, one thing that comes to my mind that's central here is what I call the Medici effect. The idea that when you bring people together across difference, the likelihood doesn't guarantee, but the likelihood of learning, creativity, and innovation is highest. There's evidence to support that. That's a perspective, uh, conceptual perspective undergirding engagement work, I would argue. Okay, there's lots we could talk about here in this context. Methodology. How do you do this work? How do you do this work? Well, first of all, let me say that, and I'm not talking about any of you because I don't know you. I'm just generalizing based on my experience in the university. I think the university's got translational stuff not right. And I'm tickled that you're engaging this conversation about or the idea of engagement in your space that you all are working in. It seems to me that translational work is two-way, democratic, respectful, dynamic interdependence, which fosters mutual learning, synergy between expert and local knowledge. It's not one way; it's two-way. I had a senior dean colleague tell me one time, Ted, you got to stop talking about this democracy crap and this engagement crap. He said, the university, what we do is we create and disseminate knowledge. I'm not kidding you. This happened down in Old Main, right? He said, that's what we do. This was 25 years ago, and I'm just still gobsmacked by that conversation. So, you know, I'm not sure we really have, as a university, have engaged the conversation about what translational means. So I'm in the methodology space here now. Just don't get lost with me. uh, other suggestions or other ideas here. I think methodologically, it's about listening and talking with, not talking to people, right? Asking questions, showing respect, building trust. That's that's the way that ideas surface and people become open and people become vulnerable. Evidencing humility in our interaction with folks across, the epistemic divides, the disciplinary divides, the experiential divides, right? Uh, Evidence humility, show empathy. I know this sounds like soft, nutty stuff, right? But we're talking about human behavior. We're talking about engaging people who have gifts, who have experience to bring, who have knowledge that can contribute to dealing with an issue. And they should have that opportunity in their space, I would argue, in their where they're living. Practice be sensitive to and practice. I've alluded to this before. A democratic epistemic politics where people are listening to each other. By the way, on this point, we have a problem in the academy of disciplinary experts not being able to talk to each other in respectful ways and integrate their mutual understandings of issues and ways to address them. I can send you some literature on that if you like, but we aren't very good at talking to each other, and we need to work on that. It's not just talking outside with people outside the academy; it's talking with each other. That's an issue. My colleagues and I, getting down to the usual methodology stuff, we've used a mixture of quantitative and qualitative methods in most all of our work. And there's another thing methodologically, it's really important. And again, you're going to say, oh, this old guy, he just doesn't know much about this crap, or it sounds wishy-washy. You got to be there. Okay. You got to be there over time. People have got to be able to count on you. All right. Not just showing up, not just showing up once or even occasionally. You got to be there. Right. Just showing up once, and we see a lot of that, is extractive. And think about it politically, because that's how people are reading it. And by the way, what we're talking about here, we're talking about our work, whatever our work is, whatever our research, our engaged research, our translational science, or whatever we're doing. But we're also talking about the university that we work for and represent. Okay. There's engagement itself is politics. You get what I mean by that? The way we work with and deal with people is political. If I just go in and leave and extract what I want, I'm telling you, people read that. They read that as autocratic. They read that as the organization not caring for them. They're doing this for their own benefit. All right. How we do our work in a community space, and we're talking about a lab space here, we're talking about a community space, is politics. And if you can't understand that meta frame, you're both going to miss the opportunity that's associated with engaged work, engaged scholarship, and you're going to create problems for yourself and for others along the line. So those are some methodological things. I'm looking at the time here. I've got some other sort of principles I wanted to. Let me just quickly read these, and then I'll wrap up and go and get some discussion here. Some principles, okay, some principles that I sort of have come to over the years. Draw on different knowledge sets and interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary perspectives. Okay, there's a lot in that. Spend time on process and connections and understand relationship dynamics. I know that sounds like a waste of time. It sounds like extra work, and it's hard work. But in terms of engaged and translational work, it's critical. Embrace and hold the complexity, the diversity, and the humility. Embrace those things. Okay. Work at creating context for local people and communities to interact and to lead on whatever the issue might be. Support people, exercise your leadership by making it possible for others to lead, whether it's a environmental issue or whether it's a health issue or whatever it might be. All right. Um, so there's some other things I might say here. I'd like to turn in closing rather than give a long speech here, and which I won't do. But the question of does community engagement matter? Okay. Well, let me challenge you on this. I'll just close with this and then come back to my why, what, and how. Does community engagement matter? Does it matter? I would say ask the question, for what and for whom, right? Let me give you an example from my Australia work. We did a lot of work with rabbits and groups of people working on rabbit issues. Okay. Rabbits are a huge problem. They're doing massive environmental damage in Australia. The agricultural crop damage is $250 million a year. right? So big deal in a country with a relatively small population, an export agriculture, and a unique ecosystem. Well, the scientists, the academics, the wildlife people always said, well, are you knocking down the rabbits? How many rabbits did you kill? Okay, let's count the rabbits. Well, you know what? In the context of the way we did our work engaging people across large landscapes, uh, farmers and academics and government people and local government um, community members. Okay, how many rabbits did you kill? Well, we'd say the estimation techniques are hard to use. We'd say, well, we did okay. The rabbit numbers seem to be down for first few weeks of last month. But you know what? The reproductive biology of rabbits is not something that you can keep up with. You aren't going to eliminate rabbits. The reproductive biology, the growth rate is almost exponential, right? So the rabbits, that's a legitimate question. How many rabbits? And are we managing the rabbits and are we keeping rabbit populations down? The answer is yes, as long as we keep at it. Can we count exactly? You never know where you are with the rabbits. Okay. So that's one perspective. Okay. Another perspective is that the way we did our work at landscape scale there was to build relationships amongst people, farmers, even PETA, okay, PETA folks, uh, government enforcement officers, academic wildlife scientists, uh, industry groups that had an interest in controlling rabbits. Okay, we worked to build strong, enduring, respectful relationships, trusting relationships across all those differences that help them collectively manage rabbits as a problem. Okay, it's the relationships that prepared the groups that we worked with to deal with the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns that confronted them. They knew each other. They trusted each other. They respected each other. They didn't have to do the dance getting to know each other every time they faced an issue. They were ready to go. And in fact, they could be a little proactive. So what's the metric here? Is it the number of rabbits? Is it the strength of the relationships? Is it both? Some combination? I would say that's the case. But to not look at the relationships when you've got an issue like rabbits or, say, disease outbreak or whatever you're dealing with strikes me as being short-sighted. And what we tend to do because of our backgrounds and our trainings, we want to look at those tangible metrics. Okay, the relationships, there's ways to measure that, and that's another discussion. But the idea is to not forget the relationships. It's the sustainability around an issue, associated with an issue, is in the nature of the relationships. Our rabbit work was one of 10 projects globally recognized by the UN for doing that kind of thing. Right. So anyhow, returning to the what, why, and how that I mentioned at the start, why community engagement? Well, my short answer to that is people matter. Everybody deserves respect, dignity, and voice in shaping the quality of their lives. Okay. What's it about? It's about building trust and sustainable relationships. It's that simple. The basis of, I want to say, an anti-fragile society. Okay. An anti-fragile society, not just a resilient, but an anti-fragile society. An anti-fragile society or an anti-fragile system is one that gets stronger in the face of adversity. And how do you do it? Be there over time, in place. Listen to and respect everyone. Ask questions, talk with people, not to them. Well, folks, that's sorry for the ramble. That's like 50 years of experience distilled down into whatever here. I hope some of this is helpful in provoking thinking in your space. I know I work in a very different space than you all do, but I hope it provokes some thinking, some questions for you in your mind for shaping your work, for thinking about this issue. And I'm very willing here to try to respond to any questions you might have. I also would ask you to think about raising questions with each other. Let's have a little dialogue here. Who's got a question? I see a hand going up. Alec?
Thank
Alec.
you for your presentation. I am Alexandra Zgierska, and I'm co-director for the CTSI's Community Engaged Research Core. So from my perspective, well, I couldn't agree more. That would be very short commentary on your presentation. The parts that I think could further expand on what you mentioned is how research funding has been structured over the decades. Like we looked at NIH as the holy grail of funding with other funding streams coming along later. And there was nothing there that was funding community engagement. So this is a much newer concept that made it to our budgets. And as we know, the budgets are driving what we can do feasibly versus not. But that has been a huge issue. It's changing. So we are super happy to see that, especially with the PCORI funded work. The landscape has started shifting and changing. So now it's nobody, or at least not too many people, raise their eyebrows when we propose in our budgets that we'll pay our partners for their experience and sharing the experience, even if they're not academicians, they are part of the proposal. So that's a positive shift. But it's still a huge issue, what you mentioned, the longitudinal sustained participation in the community. Because we typically, as you said, come and go. It all shifts with funding. And how do we develop those, not just sustained over time, but truly sustainable relationships long term? That's what will make or break our presence in the communities and as effective versus not researchers. So one of the examples is how science is just one side of things. We've known for a long time that beta blockers reduce mortality after heart attack. And it took us 18 years for people to start adopting it. So the huge gap, we think it's just what you talk about. The community of stakeholder engagement and trust in science. So that's a more long-winded thank you for your presentation. And now comes the question, how does your American-based, US-based community engagement principles, how do they translate in Australia? And I have additional motive here because we are traveling professionally with our research to Australia next month.
Yeah. Okay. Alec, where are you going?
We are primarily heading from Brisbane through Geelong, Melbourne, and Sydney. So.
Okay. Which universities are you connecting with universities?
This is a conference in general, bringing primary care researchers.
I see. Okay.
And then we'll see people from all of those places.
Yeah. Okay. Look, on the funding issue, just to comment on that, and I think the funders have moved away from this a bit. Some of the funders that we used to through USDA, for example, where we garnered funding, and we saw it in some NSF funding too. There was a request for having a engaged research dimension, or engaged scholarship dimension of the proposals. My experience with that, we did it in our work when we were writing, our smaller proposals, half million to $1 million, $500,000 typical is USDA. But when we hooked up with NSF proposals, we were usually asked to come in at the end and not really be full participants in proposal development. And that was always a bit irritating, but also, we did our best to try to help backfill from coming in at that point, coming in late. To your question about Australia, I first started working in Australia in 2009, 2010. These ideas that I've shared with you today were the basis for a $7 million project, $7 million Australian project funded by their Invasive Animals Cooperative Research Center, which is now called something different. And it was very new to them, very new. A colleague and I at the University of New England formulated that project, and it was about community-led action in the invasive animal space. Okay, it was very new, but there was enthusiasm about it, and it was embraced, and we were funded at that level. Doing the work on the ground, we found great openness on the part of community members, farmers, others who felt their voice wasn't part of the conversation. There was pushback and resistance on the part of government enforcement people and the part of academics. All right, but we brought everybody into the fold, invited everybody in, and over time, we've made a major impact in that space, and in community engagement, engaged scholarship seems to be playing a much larger role in the conversations, at least as I see it. I've been invited to come to Australia later this month in early August to work with Biosecurity Queensland on biosecurity issues, engagement around biosecurity issues. So those are just anecdotes, Alec, but I think there's an openness. I've seen it at the University of Canberra, University of New England, UTS, University of Technology at Sydney, and I've seen it out in the Western Australia. Anyway, I think there's openness. I think you'll find receptivity and potential partners. Other questions, comments?
Hi
Erica.
there. Hi there, Ted. Thank you for that. I really appreciated your approach today. I find myself with PowerPoint fatigue, and I'm never able to look and listen at the same time. So I appreciate your approach today.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Having said that, I wonder if you could speak a little bit about, I'm involved in a project right now, and I'm in partnership with an association, a professional association that has a membership base, and I'm working with a quality improvement person. And oftentimes when I ask for engagement, I mean, I think the fact that I've been able to structure this thing, and we're off and running, and we've collected data, and I've engaged them in the process of creating the data collection tool, dissemination of that tool, et cetera. But I'm running into a bit of a tricky point where I'm asking for them to engage a little bit more with the data, and they're pushing me back. Well, you're the expert. You tell us what you found. And I wonder if you might have any suggestions about how I might frame that to sort of open it up to them, as they bring a different lens to the table. I'm just trying to figure out what I can say and how I invite them back to the table to look at this data with me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's an interesting question. So this is a quality improvement group. Is it a private organization, private sector organization?
No, it's a nonprofit. So it's the
Nonprofit.
Pennsylvania Association for Community Health Centers.
I see. Okay. Okay. Well, yeah, interesting question. Interesting issue. See, so at one level, I want to say that, or make the observation that folks probably aren't used to being asked to participate like this. Okay, and that's a barrier to overcome. And they're probably, and I don't know what's in their head, right? I'm just making stuff up here, the possibilities. They may have a characterization of you and the organization you represent as being the deliverer of information that's going to solve their problem or going to address their problem. So, one approach might be to say, look, I'd like to come and share the results with you that I have. And I'd like to get your reaction to the results. And so start out by responding to their need to hear from you, but turn that into a dialogue with them about their reactions. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And I think what I'm really wanting to do is to expand the number of people at the table
Mm-hmm.
and to try to get leadership at the table, because the leadership has agreed and they're very supportive,
Yeah.
but the time constraints are very real, and trying to engage people takes time.
Sure,
So
it takes time. That's absolutely right. It takes everybody's time. And
yeah.
that's one of the challenges is the time it takes to really, develop these relationships and have this kind of dialogue. Uh, you might ask, who else in your organization uh, might have perspective on this, and maybe we could invite them to the table to be part of the discussion.
Great.
Something like that.
Yeah, good ideas. Thank you. I was successful going down the traditional route of presenting at one of their conferences.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that will be an opportunity to really engage other folks. So
Yeah. Okay. All right.
thank you very much.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you. That's a great question. Others? Oh, Marianne? Oh no, sorry. That was the little hand on my cursor. Sorry. Anyone else? Comments? Questions?
Dr. Alter, Justine actually put a comment in the chat. I'm not sure if you can see it.
Oh, okay. I wasn't looking at the chat here. Let me see here. Justine, which?
She's talking about like saying one of the challenges with community engagement and grants is in budget inequities. I wasn't sure if you wanted to discuss that here at the end.
Yeah, we could talk. Justine, would you like to comment on that?
Sure, I can comment on that. Yeah, I guess I was just thinking about some of the challenges that I've come across in building grants that do community engaged work. And, the challenge is kind of twofold. Like there are a series of grants that we've applied to with community partners around food justice, food equity work in communities living under conditions of food apartheid or whatever it might be. And increasingly, what we're seeing from USDA is actually something that I think is really fantastic, is that universities are not eligible for grants. And so there are a series of programs. One of them is urban agriculture and innovative production. And anyway, these ones probably aren't super relevant to you all, but so the university is automatically kind of relegated to a sub position. And but then the challenge from the university side is, okay, well, do I have the sort of latitude to put forth the resources to help communities build this grant application and to be the sub on the grant? Do they have the resources to actually manage one of these really huge grants without the budget offices and the grants and contracts offices that we have. So that's one approach that I think actually deals with this equity issue in a meaningful way, is to put the control over managing a grant into community hands. So whether it's a nonprofit organization or local government or whatever it might be. But then from the other side, when the university is managing a grant, especially when there's federal dollars that are coming through and we're subject to full F&A rates, almost 60%, or I don't know what your F&A rates are at Penn State Hershey, but for us, I think this year it's 58.4, 58.6% of the grant is gone. And then you have, okay, well, am I going to fund a grad student? Am I going to pay for some of my own salary? Am I going to pay for, whatever the research costs are? And I think what happens is that often the resources that go to the community end up being, like I said in my comment, sort of the leftovers, or whatever you can kind of squeeze into the grant. An example of this is a grant that I was peripherally involved with when I was a grad student several years ago now, that was a $5 million 5-year grant through USDA. It was sort of colloquial and known amongst the partners as the Food Dignity Project, or the Food Dignity Grant. And there's actually an excellent special issue from the Journal of Agriculture, Food Systems, and Community Development that discussed the Food Dignity Project in pretty good detail. And Christine Porter wrote a methodological piece on this project that you all might be interested in. But the funding, the grant was separated. It was a multi-site project. So there was East New York Farms in Brooklyn. There was a site in Ithaca, New York. There was a site in Laramie, Wyoming, and there was a site in Oakland, California. And we had partners across all of those sites. And it was a lot of different sort of universities. Cornell University was the PI, or the host of the grant. And it ended up being like 75% of the funding went to universities, and 25% of the funding was split among all of these community partners. And even that, people are like, wow, we had to really fight to even get 25% of the funding to go to community partners, because it ended up being a large percentage of the grant when you think about everything that gets siphoned off from the university side. But the way that was perceived by the community partners was, wow, you have this one university, or maybe two, because of Laramie, University of Wisconsin, of Wyoming, that were the university partners. You have these two institutions, but we have like 5 community partners that are made to share this 25% cut of the funding. And after all of the F&A and everything, it ended up being like chump change. It was not enough to actually meaningfully compensate people for their time, for their expertise, and for their efforts and energy in the project. So that is something that has always kind of stuck with me, is like, how do we push back against these kind of systems and institutions that are designed for their own sustainability? So the university is designed to sustain itself through grants. It's not designed to siphon or to funnel money into communities. And that's something that some of my colleagues and I are really trying to figure out. Like, how do we basically get university resources and dump them into the communities that we're working with? So that's all I wanted to say with that comment.
Yeah, I've seen this is a really important issue, I think, in terms of motivating communities and doing the kind of work we're talking about here today. I've seen over the years, I've seen foundations be more willing to fund communities, if you will, as opposed to funding universities. They would fund partnerships. I'm thinking of the Kellogg Foundation. We've had some big grants in the Kellogg Foundation and some others over the years. Foundations seem more willing to do that. Start there. And I didn't talk, and we're running out of time here. The Victorian Rabbit Action Network, I think I sent you a piece. So I sent some publications that Jessica will send on to you that maybe it'll be interesting. There is a practitioner's guide on community engagement for collective action that's got some stuff in it that you might find useful. And it's very accessible. It's not dense text. The Victorian Rabbit Action Network is a community group that's formed in the state of Victoria to manage rabbits, and the government's at the table. It's led by, and community farmers are at the table, community officials are at the table, businesses at the table. the Victorian Rabbit Action Network designs, develops programs in a co-creative way, and the government puts money on the table through the Rabbit Action Network to actually address the rabbit issues, and they get money from other places too. So that's a different mechanism that government was willing in that instance. And Alec, I'm thinking of you. I mean, you're not going to be working with rabbits, but you're going to be in Melbourne, Victoria. There's openness, not without some hardball politics, openness with to do that sort of thing. Getting dollars to the community, not just to fund, get-togethers, but to actually do engaged research and meaningful work. So listen, I think we're at the end here. Thank you to all of you. Jessica, thank you, and to Orfeo for this opportunity. I appreciate it. I hope there was some usefulness to it all, and I'm glad to, drop me a note. I'm glad to connect and talk with you anytime. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Alter. Like I said, Dr. Alter has shared many additional resources with us, and they'll be sent out to you along with a copy of the video of the presentation and a survey for you to complete. I want to thank you all for joining us today, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks, folks.